Hi there, ladies and gents. It's Dan from Adventure More UK. Welcome to another episode of my podcast, Catch on the Flip Side. Today's special guest is two times Britain's strongest disabled man. He's a professional amputee footballer and he's also a British Army veteran. The man is Mr. Mark Smith. How are you, my friend?
Hey, mate, you all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Like I said, it's good. As we mentioned beforehand, I've been following your journey for quite a number of years, and obviously you've gone through quite a lot of different sort of stages from when you had your accident all the way up until the present day. But what I want to talk about first of all is before the military, because as I mentioned, you've been in the military in the British Army. What did you do before then? Like did you, like from like a young age up until when you joined?
To be honest, sort of most of my growing up was taken up with football.
Okay.
I played from sort of 7 years old right up until I joined the military. That was sort of all that sort of really mattered to me. And then obviously you get to 13, 14, you realise you're not going to quite make it as a professional footballer, and you start looking at more realistic alternatives. And yeah, for me, I didn't particularly sort of like the whole sort of sitting at a desk at school for hours on end, and I liked sort of being up and about and active. I was a bit of a fidget, I suppose, and I suppose that's where the military suited me. It was something that started to appeal to me more the older I got towards the end of school, because it was going to be sort of physical, sort of active still. I was going to get to travel the world, which I'd wanted to do. It was going to get me away from home, which I really wanted to do. um,
Yeah.
and yeah, start with a clean slate. Go somewhere where you know the people from school and stuff don't know you, and yeah, the army was just a fresh start. You're almost sort of uh, buying into a family. Um,
Mm.
and I liked that. I liked the thought of there would be a roof over my head, food, money. So all of the things that they gave me, that freedom to leave home. Um, yeah. So from about sort of 13, 14, I knew I wanted to join.
Yeah, that's it's like I said. I know a lot of people like that. I know there's a lot of people who go from, like they've had problems in the past, and obviously they just want to get away from their issues at home or issues in the local area and just want to join. I'm probably similar to you. Like I played sport all the way through school, uh, and ever since I started pretty much in high school, since I started actually doing like my high school work and looking at what I wanted to do in life, I always wanted to join the army. So I joined at 16, and I joined up. I went to Harrogate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did you join at 16 or was it 18 you joined at?
No, 18, because my parents weren't so keen on me joining, and obviously you need
Okay.
you need your consent, don't you, under 18.
Mm, yeah.
So yeah, obviously once I turned 18, I joined anyway.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
my
yeah.
eyes, it was delaying the inevitable. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can agree. I know my parents weren't too sort of keen, because obviously you would have joined up at a similar time to me then, where, with heat of like, well, the peak of kind of Afghan, Iraq and stuff like that.
yeah,
And obviously at that time, like my parents didn't want to send me to join the army, and eventually, inevitably I would have gone to these places, which I did.
yeah,
Um, but you join? Was it? Did you join the Grenadier Guards? Was that, am I right in saying?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So was that something you wanted to do, or did you not really know what sort of regiment or battalion or trade you wanted to do?
To be fair, the recruiting sergeant on the desk in Milton Keynes careers office was a Grenadier Guard. Um,
Right.
all of my previous sort of times I'd gone in, it was a Royal Green Jacket. And
Yeah.
then the day that it came to actually filling out my choices before I went on selection, the Green Jacket wasn't there and the Grenadier was. Um, so he scribbled out Royal Green Jackets and replaced it with Grenadier Guards. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how the Grenadiers come about. But I I went in with an open mind. I just said, I want to. I don't come from sort of a military background or anything, but I want to be an infantry soldier. Um, so I didn't really have any preference in terms of regiments. I was more. going off of them. So yeah, the day that it was a grenadier in the office, it was always going to be grenadiers.
Yeah. It's quite a common sort of theme, like especially for people who joined probably from our time and sort of earlier. Nowadays, it's a lot more structured, but yeah, in my situation, it wasn't. Don't get me wrong, mine wasn't that kind of situation. My three choices when I joined up with the paras, because I thought, you watch all these programs and films, and you just want to jump out of planes. And I was 16, 15 when I started looking at joining. So I was like, I want to jump out of planes. Then they were like, no, you're not big enough or strong enough, whatever. So I tried joining the QLR, Queen's Lancs, which is what it was then, because that's where I'm from. And then Duke of Wellington's, which is another again what it used to be called. But when you do your barb test, where you do all your tests and stuff like that, they basically said, look, don't get me wrong, I wasn't Albert Einstein, I wasn't an A-star student, but they were like, look, you've got some qualifications, you did pretty well in your GCSEs. Is there like something you're interested in? And I was like, well, I kind of like doing working with computers and stuff like that. And they were like, well, why don't you join the Signals? And I was like, right, okay, that sounds good to me. You get to play with computers all day. Obviously, it's not like that, but that's kind of how I went. I went down the route. So yeah, I could have, I joined joined the infantry, but I went and did a trade. And some people are different. Like you say, I've known a lot of people to sort of be in the same situation as yourself, where you go to the recruiting office and whoever's, whatever corporal's there, sergeant, whatever, you generally, if you don't know what you're doing or don't know what you want to join, you tend to join that person's regiment, battalion, whatever. It's quite a common thing. I don't know if you've met quite a few other people in the same situation.
Yeah, most lads in the Grenadiers. It's funny because you got given a load of VHSs to go and sit in the office and watch the recruiting videos. And when I'd said, oh, have you got one on the Grenadiers? Oh, no, we haven't got that one in at the minute. So, there was no alarm bells, but I did watch one on the Signals, one on the REME, and that's when I sort of said I'm not really looking for a trade. I was the opposite. Like everything you sort of saw on the television, like you said about the paras, that was what appealed to me. So yeah, when I come out of there, I was like, no, I definitely want to be an infantry soldier.
Yeah. It's like I said, as a lot of people know, it's obviously there's a lot of different regiments and battalions. Like, is the Grenadier Guards like local to yourselves? I know up where I live in the northwest, it's the Scots Guards. I think is Gren Guards sort of near where you are. Generally,
There was a few lads in battalion from Milton Keynes, but not many. Most lads from Milton Keynes go to the Anglians or what's now the Rifles, which was the Green Jackets. We got a load of old Green Jackets around here, and quite a few lads that I've got to know that are sort of ex-bootnecks and stuff. But the Grenadiers was mainly sort of Bristol, Manchester, and Wolverhampton. They were like the main recruiting areas for the Grenadiers.
Okay, that's quite a spaced out area.
Sorry,
it's quite a spaced out area then. That really.
Yeah. It's and then like you said, obviously the Scots Guards. You've got lads from sort of places like Blackburn and stuff, and
that's where I'm from.
There you go. Most of the sort of Grenadiers are Manx or Bristolians. So
Okay, it's different. It's strange how obviously if you went back towards the sort of like the Second World War and stuff like that, and even the First World War, obviously you had pretty much all the battalions and regiments were from that particular area. Like there wasn't really spread out because obviously they've just recruited from the local towns and stuff like that. I just want to talk about like some of the things you've done. Like, obviously, I know you've done a few tours and stuff like that. What tours have you been up to and what you've done?
My first tour when I was 19 was Bosnia, so that was a winter tour. That was to be fair, like as a young lad, that was a good experience. obviously a long sort of stint away from home, Christmas and New Year away, and obviously the opportunity to sort of earn a medal from it. And then the following year we went out to Iraq, Telic 8, which I really enjoyed. So our regiment was split down. The companies all went to sort of different places, and we went up to Baghdad. And yeah, I loved it up there. It was sort of daily patrols up and down Route Irish to the Bayat Baghdad airport, and so nothing was really done on foot. It was all done in snatch vehicles. So
yeah.
and then obviously Herrick went to Afghan in 2009 on a winter tour, which again I enjoyed. I quite liked the simplicity of being away on tour. I suppose sort of barrack life, is a bit more sort of mundane. You've got, obviously with the Grenadiers, you've got the ceremonial duties and stuff as well. Whereas, to be away on tour, I actually thought was quite a sort of laid back sort of lifestyle and soldiering, which was what I enjoyed. And then I got to we went away sort of quite often, sort of overseas for exercises. So I'd gone and done sort of jungle training in Jamaica, the Falkland Islands, Kenya, and obviously Canada. So one of the things, like I said, when I was a sort of teenager wanting to join, I wanted to go and see the parts of the world that your holiday companies wouldn't necessarily go to. And I was very lucky that sort of I joined the Grenadiers at a time when it was sort of back-to-back tours and stuff. So I got, thankfully, to go around the world.
And with your tours and stuff like that, I can understand. I can completely understand where you're coming from with, like, because when you're on tour, for instance, when I was in Afghan, it's very much a routine. Like you set shifts or set patrols, etc., etc. And like you say, when you're back in barracks, like for me personally, it was a rotation, as it is with most regiments, battalions, and corps. Where you do 6 months of training, 6 months of this, like pre-deployment training, and then obviously you do a 6-month tour, and then obviously while you're doing your before you do your training, all it was making sure the Land Rovers were up to scratch, and you go and make sure the radios and test all the equipment on a weekly basis, whatever, monthly basis, and it's quite, like you say, it's mundane, it's very boring. I felt it was very boring. So when you were saying about how being on tour and stuff, it's a bit, it's quite different. I can completely agree, because it's a bit more exciting, obviously, because all that training you've put in for the past sort of 6 months previous to that tour, particularly, you put into your tour. Now, I know, coming from different, like obviously being Grand Guards, and then for myself being a service support, as they call it. I was quite lucky and fortunate that I was attached to different regiments, battalions, or different nationalities. I've spoke about this before, and I was attached to the Americans. I've been attached to the Danish, etc., as a signaller. Do you ever get opportunities like that, being an infantry soldier?
We had sort of elements of Americans and stuff with us in our checkpoint in Nadi Ali. We had a small team of Americans that were for calling in sort of fast air and stuff. But it's essentially just sort of on our own. I mean, but Bosnia, we got to work with the Italians, the Dutch. So that was an experience. But places like Iraq, it was only sort of within. So probably not as much as yourself.
It's just something I'm always interested in, with being, obviously, like I said, being someone who's generally supported to, like yourselves. Like I don't know if you ever had, like, you would have had, Royal Signal radio operators and stuff like that attached to yourself, and like you say, it's generally speaking, I think doing the job you do, you don't get attached to other battalions, regiments, units, etc. just because of the nature of your job,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of, obviously that's just the way the military works, I suppose. Um, I, I know you mentioned obviously you've been abroad and did different tours, i.e., not Afghan or Iraq or Bosnia. You mentioned Kenya and stuff like that. And I know you said you mentioned Canada, and obviously that brings me up to probably the most sort of thing, not important, but the most sort of the thing that brought me to sort of how you are today, being obviously your accident. For people that don't know, is it possible you can just give a bit of a brief sort of background and what happened, and what happened in Canada?
Yeah. So at the start of 2011, I was away on SCBC, the Section Commanders Battle Course in Brecon. So obviously in that you get your skill at arms qualifications, um, and then as soon as juniors had finished and I'd picked up my promotion, I'd got back just as the battalion was going out to Canada. So that was going to be the start of our pre-deployment to go out on Herrick 16 in 2012. So I quite enjoyed obviously the exercise stage of it, because that was my first time working as a lance sergeant and having my own section, and the added sort of responsibility and input that I could have. So I felt like I really thrived in the 6 weeks within the rifle company, and I'd come back with a lot of sort of ideas and things I wanted to implement myself that I'd picked up from the instructors on tactics and things like that. And I felt as a lance sergeant I had a bit more weight behind me to air those ideas and for those ideas to sort of be implemented in the platoon. And so I really enjoyed that side of it. And then because I was now skill at arms qualified, though the lance sergeants and above were staying behind to help out with the range safety for 3 Yorks, and an opportunity came up which sounded like the sort of the easy route for the next 6 weeks. Obviously we'd just done
Yeah.
everything on foot for the last 6, and it would be working with the dismounted infantry. So when they'd said, you'll be going everywhere on vehicles rather than on foot, you'll just debus, follow them to clear a position and mount back up. So that seemed quite appealing, like
Yeah.
not sort of walking around for hours on end again. But obviously it was different. I hadn't done armored infantry or anything like that before. And so, like I said, it seemed like, well, at least the next 6 weeks, it's not going through the same ranges again. Like I'll do it. And yeah, sort of I was sort of picking the brains of the permanent safety staff that were out there on a 2-year posting and just trying to sort of get up to speed and stuff. And then they went through their live firing, sort of building up, sort of going down as an individual, pairs, fire team, section. So all of that I was happy with, but there was a shortage of kit and equipment, notably sort of high visibility vests, deserts, which the other safety staff were in, and radio equipment. So when the scale of the ranges got bigger, platoon attack and upwards, they became more disorientating because I didn't have a radio. I had no communication with any of the other safety staff. And so the particular day that it happened was a platoon attack range. So the sections would be in the back of warrior vehicles. So the 30mm cannons would fire at the first position. The lads would debus out the back and go and clear a bunker position. And that would be our cue to sort of debus and follow them. And then following on from that was a trench system. And on the first platoon in the morning, that was as far as I went. The section that I was following just stayed as fire support, so I didn't go any further forward than the trench system. We stopped for lunch, and then I'd sort of said I found it quite disorientating, almost straining to hear, which obviously, like when you've been in for a while, your ears ring as soon as there's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a live round fired. So you've got that ringing in your ears anyway. It's noisy. There's lads obviously sort of shouting and stuff, and so I was really sort of straining to hear, and obviously the spacing that you've got between the safety staff, and so I'd sort of aired my concerns at the sort of stop for lunch that I didn't feel particularly safe on that range. Um, but being sort of an external posting, so to speak, and working with people from different regiments and um, different officers, and there was an element of just get on with it. So again, when the second range started with the second platoon, same thing again, except the section that I was following through the trench system then became the assaulting section to push on and clear the compounds. So I went with them. They stacked up outside in their assaulting pairs, and I'd have been due to go in with the last pair in the last room. And obviously, I had no communication with the safety staff member that had gone in for the first room. And then, yeah, no sooner had they'd gone in to clear the first room than the rounds came through the wall, just MDF buildings they were. And I had my back to the wall. Obviously, I was the sort of furthest extreme forward of the safety staff at that point. And yeah, and I took sort of several, went in through my backside, come out through my groin, and then one went in through the back of my shoulder and come out the front. And then yeah, there was a bit of sort of confusion that followed, because obviously there'd been role play casualties. We were obviously sort of testing their casualty evacuation drills and stuff, and so man down gets called, and there was a few seconds before they realised it was obviously a genuine casualty, and then the range was stopped, and the other safety staff lads sort of quickly closed in and started treating me. But 3 Yorks at that point hadn't been on a Herrick, hadn't been to Afghanistan before, and in the Grenadiers, our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, were to carry tourniquets, morphine on sort of exercise like that, first field dressings, and the lads that were going down the range didn't have any of that. So it was basically what the safety staff could, throw together. So I had the 2 tourniquets applied. The shoulder sort of came later before they started, packing that. But it meant that I had no morphine or anything. I had no pain relief. And because it was an exercise, when the 9-liner was sent through for a casualty evacuation, they took it as part of the exercise as role play. So there was a lot of confusion that followed. They sent a Lynx helicopter as opposed to sort of how you would get the MERT in Afghanistan, and it took a long time to get me off the ground. And yeah, the heli sort of went away again, and then ended up coming back, and the medic, sort of got off the back and didn't have morphine either. And in total, by the time I was eventually airlifted, I'd been on the ground for around about 90 minutes.
Wow, well, that's a long time. Yeah, one thing I was going to ask, actually, because obviously when me as a signaller, we used to do training exercises and stuff. We used to use like the no play procedure, stuff like that, or no play scenarios. So obviously you do everything as you would normally, and obviously if you had an actual casualty, a serious casualty especially, you'd obviously use your no play procedures. Is that not something I would obviously didn't, but I would have thought that was something they might have used, obviously in the height of adrenaline and stuff like that. I'm sure people must have obviously been really confused at the fact that you're on a training exercise, but you're actually a real casualty. That must obviously confuse a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Just an air of confusion. Obviously, stop was called as soon as they realised it was a genuine casualty, which obviously that's given in your sort of range standing orders before the range goes sort of live. And so all of that was done. There was just a delay between obviously me being shot, sort of letting out the odd scream or two before the range actually was stopped. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, I can't criticise any of the safety staff that treated me. They were phenomenal. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. They
Yeah.
they kept me alive long enough to get me on the heli. And yeah, I obviously literally sort of owe my life to those lads.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just it's one of those things which I sort of found out once I got to sort of Headley Court later on, that there's actually quite a lot of lads that end up injured in Canada, which you don't really sort of hear. Obviously, I know there's one recently in Castle Martin, and
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, it's I actually found out when I got to Headley Court that it's happened in Canada on quite a few occasions, and happened within a few months of this happening to me on the same range.
Mm.
So yeah, there's certainly a risk factor with the ranges in Bathurst.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel again, coming from, I've been in that, not your situation, but I've been in situations where obviously people have been injured and stuff like that. Obviously, to most people in the general public who haven't served in the military, etc., won't understand that. Obviously, people hear a lot, especially back when obviously Afghan was still operating. Let's say there were obviously people would hear about people getting killed with IEDs and being shot, etc. But no one ever hears about the people who obviously, like people like yourself, who've been shot, and obviously, unfortunately, we'll go into it in a minute. But obviously, what happened, and and obviously coming through the other side, obviously, I can't remember this exact statistic, but obviously, there's something I think along the lines of for every one death there was in Afghan, there was like 10 people, or probably even more, that had been shot or blown up and not been killed, and that's what people
Yeah.
don't understand. But just going back to when obviously the accident. So what was the sort of procedure then from getting you off the ground back to Headley Court? Because obviously, it's quite a distance.
Yeah. So I was flown to Medicine Hat initially, which was obviously the closest hospital to the ranges,
Mm.
and then I was basically sort of stabilised, sedated, and flown on to Calgary. Um, all of the while, I've still got the tourniquets and stuff on, and so there was a delay in obviously sort of getting me operated on. I then spent sort of 12 days in intensive care in Calgary, before the MOD said that I was sort of well enough to be flown back to England. And yeah, I mean, from what I recall, I don't think the Canadians were particularly sort of happy with me going so soon. And when I
Right.
look back at it now, I don't think I was. I don't think I was well enough
Yeah.
to fly. Yeah, I wasn't in a good way when it came to flying back. And then yeah, I was taken to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, and taken straight to intensive care. And I think I spent a further 3 weeks in intensive care there before I got up onto the actual military ward.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I was there for around about 9 weeks. Um, and then, yeah, obviously, once you sort of start to pick up and you've had certain drains removed and things like that, certain operations that have helped, and once I'd got to a stage that I was well enough, yeah, I then was discharged from hospital and then started at Headley Court. um, and that's where the sort of magic happens. That's where you get walking, and that's where all the lads that you spent the last few months with on the ward, you see making massive strides of progress. Everyone looks really sort of gaunt and ill in hospital, and obviously no one's on prosthetic legs or anything like that, all in wheelchairs and all with drains and vacuum packs attached to them. And
Mm.
the worst the worst you could possibly look is how I'd seen them all. And then a lot of those lads, it coincided with Herrick and I think 4-2 and 4-5 Commando from the Royal Marines were out there at the time. So a lot of the
Yeah.
lads on the ward were Royal Marines. So a lot of them I didn't know before this. I was the only grenadier. And yeah, obviously you see the sort of severity of the injuries and everything coming back. And So I'd only ever known those lads as injured blokes. So then when you get to Headley and then you see them again and they've put on a bit of weight, they're up on prosthetics, so they're no longer at waist height, and
Mm.
it's yeah, it's surreal. Um, but the best group of people you could possibly be around in a situation like this, because it, like I said, like I mean, the lad opposite me was a triple amputee, and he was one of the most upbeat, positive people you could be around. So that
Was
rubbed
he
off.
a Royal Marine as well?
Sorry.
Was he a Royal Marine as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't Mark by any chance, was it?
No, a lad called Spider, ironically.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
lad
okay,
called Matt Webb. But yeah, he was opposite me once I'd actually got up onto the ward, and just seeing the progress that he was making, and he was getting himself up and about, never complaining, never sort of wallowing. And when you've got someone like that opposite you, obviously far worse off than I was, you put your own sort of injuries into perspective, and you sort of you become very positive and appreciative like early on. So
yeah,
I think sort of being with him in particular really sort of set me up mentally going forward.
yeah,
I just saw myself as quite lucky. Um,
yeah,
and then obviously, yeah, when you get to Headley, your mind is solely set on I'm going to get walking, I'm going to get running, I'm going to do this, that, the other. Like that's where you really sort of make progress. Whereas the hospital, you're just trying to get well enough to get out of there.
yeah. I can understand. I can. That makes sense. So at what point was the decision made? So obviously, as people won't know, obviously by looking at you now, but at what point did they make the decision to amputate your leg?
So I was shot on the 3rd of July, um, and I still had the leg at that point. Um, and my wife was flown over, um, basically to turn off my life support.
Right.
That's sort of where I was at, and I was there for 2 days, before when they brought me back round. Then I was sort of given the ultimatum of amputating the leg, and I wasn't. I was reluctant at first because I loved playing football, and obviously I loved being in battalion, and I knew that. Well, I thought both of those things would end once my leg was gone. So I was trying to sort of plead to only take the leg below the knee. I believed if I kept my knee joint, I'd be able to stay in.
Yeah.
Um, I still had aspirations to go on seniors and stuff like that, and so yeah, when obviously the surgeon had said, it's going to need to be taken above the knee. Yeah, that was sort of quite upsetting because I thought at the time I would never play football again, and I'd only just become a dad. My eldest was born whilst I was in Brecon, when I was on juniors, and so I hadn't really sort of got to spend much time with him. And I thought, I'm not going to get to do the whole sort of being in the back garden, having a kick about with your son, and all
Yeah.
of these things were going around in my mind. Not even the thought of actually missing a leg, just the things that I would miss. And the two things that were on my mind as I was going down to theatre to have the amputation was football and losing my career.
Mhm.
And that sort of really got to me. But to be fair, like they were pinching the toes and stuff, and because the leg was starting to give me organ failure, where it was
Right.
dead essentially.
Yeah.
And the part of me still wanted to say I could feel them pinching my toes, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't. The leg was killing me. But yeah, and then once they'd taken it above the knee, and I'd gone in several more times to have more taken, but then I'd started to pick up, and obviously, what was killing me was gone. So
Mm.
then I could start to make progress. So yeah, I mean, in hindsight now, obviously all these years later, that was probably the best decision and the best thing that could have happened to me. Strangely enough.
Yeah. It's I do talk a bit about mental health and stuff like that, and you mentioned being about all the lads in Headley Court and stuff like that. Now, for someone who's ex-military myself, I can understand the banter that you probably would have had in that in the hospital. And obviously, I spoke about this with some of my other guests and some of my other, veteran guests. And what people consider banter, i.e., us as military people, obviously, a lot of civilians, as I like to call it in inverted commas, would probably call that well, they probably class it as bullying, I suppose. But and obviously, I don't want to talk about too much about what's happened recently, but I know about like what has been happening with Ant Middleton and stuff in the papers recently, and I can understand where he's coming from about how us as military people have a completely, most of us anyway, not all of us, most of us have a different sort of sense of humour and generally quite a dark sense of humour.
Yeah.
So I think if people had eyes and ears in this sort of situation of you being, in and with all the other sort of injured soldiers or injured military personnel in the hospital, obviously I'm sure there would have been words said, but I suppose in a way that's what kind of keeps us kind of happy and keeps us, because as you say, when you join up and you want to be part of a team, and you want to be through people that are on your left and right who would do anything to help you in whatever situation that would be. And I suppose you were saying about how when you was in Headley, obviously there were people there who obviously you wasn't in the same battalion. They weren't Grand Guards, they were Marines, etc., all Marines. But I'm sure you probably made quite a lot of good friends from there and people that probably still talk to today. Now, when obviously just going forward a little bit towards when you got discharged, was that your decision or was that an army decision?
So when I went down for my medical board in Aldershot, it sort of came at the right time. I felt like I was at a bit of a crossroads. Headley Court, like I actually look at my time in hospital, strangely enough, and at Headley with like fond memories, because that sense of humour is all the time. It
Yeah,
is still like being part of the battalion. Although they're lads, you've instantly got like something in common. Like your sense of humour.
yeah,
And so I enjoyed it there, but you do get to a point I felt, which I also felt was a good thing, where you're at a crossroads. You're not going back to battalion, um, but you're not yet a civilian. You're just in between, and it's that feeling of purpose. I'm not going to be a grenadier again, but I'm also at the minute I'm not away from it. So I'd got to a point where it's like, actually, if the opportunity comes up, I'll take the medical discharge. And
yeah,
there were a couple of roles that were sort of open to me to stay in, and lads in the battalion that lost their legs on Herrick 6 had chosen to stay in, and had then said, in hindsight, they wish they hadn't, because they didn't enjoy the jobs they were given, sort of working in the stores and stuff. And one of the things that was offered to me was to be like the battalion admin sergeant,
yeah,
and I didn't want that. Like if I couldn't still be a soldier and everything that came with it, I didn't want to. I thought it'd be worse for me to stay in and be around them all, see them all sort of go away on tours, and you're stuck behind on rear party and all that sort of stuff. Um, I didn't. I thought it'd be worse to stay in and be around it, but not be really involved. So yeah, when they sort of offered me the discharge, I was ready to sort of take it. And then you've got a timeline. Then you've then got a year to
yeah,
sort yourself out, to bleed Headley dry of all of the you know the facilities that they offer you. Get as much from them as you can in terms of sort of treatment and everything like that, and courses. And so I did. It's like I've got a year now and I'm going to make the most of it. But yeah, when it came, it was a strange feeling, obviously handing in your ID card and stuff, and
yeah,
knowing that to get back in you need an escort and like that was a weird feeling, but um, it felt a relief to at least know now where my life was sort of heading. I wasn't sort of stuck anymore. Um, but yeah, it's not how I sort of saw my career ending. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
obviously I intended to sort of stay in for a full career, and that's probably what I struggled with at Headley. Is some lads were good at accepting that early on and having backup plans, careers that they would have liked to have done as well. Whereas throughout Headley, I got sort of asked a lot by the occupational therapists and stuff what my plan was beyond Headley, and I didn't really have one. I all of these, what do you want to do for a career afterwards? What do you want to work in? And that whole 2 year stint there is like, I don't know. Whereas I'd been so fixated as a teenager that I wanted to be a soldier that I still didn't really have a backup plan. Um, that was the only sort of thing that worried me. But obviously, coming out with your pension takes an element of those sort of worries away, because at least financially I was looked after.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's something that, like, for obviously people that listen will know that I used to work with kids during pre-COVID, so I used to work with children, um, and one thing I always say to them is, look, you can do whatever you want in life, but there may be times where things happen that you have no control over, and that's obviously a similar situation for yourself. But rather than just sit there and just dwell in and just letting it get on top of you, um, just fight through it and carry on, because things will happen. Things do happen. You know, like again, going back to looking at yourself. Obviously, you intended to do a 22-year career, probably more if you wanted to. But obviously, unfortunately, you came across, not came across. So you were involved in this accident, which obviously cut your career short. But for what you've done since you left the military, I think is amazing for considering the circumstances. Now, one thing, obviously, we're going away now from the military, and obviously you were unfortunately medically discharged. Um, First of all, was it you had a sort of, you dabbed in a little bit of being a personal trainer? Am I right in saying?
Yeah, so I'd use my resettlement course.
Mm,
To, yeah, use my sort of learning credits and all that, and I did my PT course. Because the only thing I sort of could say to the occupational therapist was I want to do something that's still active. Um,
mm,
Something to do with sport. I still need to be up and about. And so obviously when it came to the resettlement course after you leave, it was like personal training. I can be in a gym, I can still be active, um, and it seemed on paper like that's probably my best option.
yeah,
So I did 3 months at Bannatynes, which
yeah,
um, in my mind I thought, as a personal trainer, hopefully I'll be able to sort of motivate people in the gym that are sort of struggling. If I'm joining in with them and leading by example, that'll sort of get the best out of them. And I think coming from Headley Court, being around such highly motivated people, people
yeah,
that were so driven to push themselves and prove what you could do, missing legs and arms, and to then work with people who were really struggling for motivation. And um, I don't know, I didn't take to it very well. Uh,
yeah,
I found it quite draining and exhausting that these people didn't share my enthusiasm and my drive. Um, and so within that first 3 months, I just remember thinking, like, I can't do this for the next 30 years or so. Like, I can't even see me doing this for the next 30 days. Like,
yeah,
this isn't what I'm meant to do. Um, like, get up at 6 o'clock every morning and go to the gym for sort of 10, 12 hours. Like, this isn't. I love training in a gym, whereas working in one was very different.
Mm.
And it's like, no, I need a challenge. I need something that's going to sort of fire me up and, you know, get me out of this sort of rut that I can feel myself slipping into. Um,
Yeah.
so I'd been looking throughout Headley online in the evenings when you're sort of sat in your bed space, and um, a lot of American bodybuilders were popping up that were on prosthetic legs, and
Yeah.
I'd mentioned it a couple of times to the physios and stuff, and they they didn't really have too much knowledge on any of it, and then yeah, when I sort of opted not to stay as a personal trainer, I'd said to my wife I'd like to sort of push myself and see if I can step up on stage. And I'd found a competition that was including a disability class, so I would be up there with other disabled people,
Yeah.
and for me, with how ill I was in hospital and how much weight I'd lost, and I saw bodybuilding as the perfect end of that chapter.
Mm.
This is how far I've come, and here I am, stood in a pair of posing trunks, being critiqued in front of a crowd of people. Um, except I'm not going to be judged for the prosthetic leg. I'm going to be judged for everything else that I'm still more than capable of training.
Yeah.
And I quite liked that people, whether they said it openly or not, doubted that I could do it. And I suppose that was what fired me up. In my head, this is something that I don't think people believed I could do. It was, probably thought I was still on morphine or something,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that sort of, it fired me up. And discussing with my wife the fact that obviously I would be giving up work, and would my pension sort of cover everything, and would we still be sort of financially secure, and to see that we were, enabled me to sort of focus fully on preparing to step up on a stage. And yeah, so I entered my first competition within a couple of days of leaving Bannatynes, and I gave myself, I think it was 5 months, um, to get up on stage.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And you obviously you're pretty successful in it, I believe, from what I've seen. Um, what sort of level did you go to?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those whirlwind things. I wanted to do it once, like I said, to sort of close that chapter and prove I could do it. I never really had any intentions of doing it more than once, but through the positive aspect of social media, the competition that I'd done in Margate, my first one, I ended up winning.
Okay.
So I was on stage with two lads with cerebral palsy, and that in itself was an eye opener for me, because although I'd been around lots of amputees and lads who had lost their sight and were paralysed, obviously from Afghan and Iraq, I hadn't really been around people that were born with a disability.
Mm.
So that sort of gave me a new sort of sense of perspective in that sense, as to, I had like I was able to play Sunday League football growing up. I did all of them normal things, I suppose, and yeah, it made me appreciate how lucky I was. But I won that competition, and like I said, sort of through social media, people had uploaded videos and stuff of me on stage, and it caught the eye of the head of the NPC, which is the biggest amateur bodybuilding federation in America.
Okay.
So I was on Twitter at the time, and the organizer had invited me out to America to do the Phil Heath Classic.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, obviously when I sort of replied to him and we started messaging, and I realised he was serious, I jumped at the chance, and
Mm.
that that there was what opened up so many more doors. And then from there, obviously, uh, whilst I was at the Phil Heath Classic, I got to share the stage with him. I was sort of invited on for a pose down with Phil Heath himself, and that was sort of the making of me, I suppose, because I then became known as that bloke that shared the stage with Phil Heath. So
Yeah,
that then
yeah,
led to more invitations to competitions. And I wanted to use that platform that I then had to try and inspire, in the back of my mind, other veterans, but people of all disabilities, that you can get up on stage and you can sort of achieve anything. And so yeah, I took up the invitation to plenty of other competitions after that, and I was fortunate enough to sort of win 5 or 6 more shows, and I was invited to guest pose at Body Power on the pro stage,
yeah,
and yeah, it was just a bit of a whirlwind. I I embraced it, I suppose, and just I believed I'll be old news tomorrow. So while these opportunities come my way, I'm going to take them, and I just sort of jumped at every opportunity. But obviously, that meant staying in condition, ready to get up on stage for pretty much 9 months straight, which was hard going.
yeah, yeah. I can imagine. I've never been in, to that level, and I've never competed in bodybuilding as such, but I know people who do, and it is quite difficult to keep in, like you were saying before about keeping in that sort of peak kind of condition for most of the year round. And obviously you've got to keep within a percentage of the body weight that you're probably competing at, etc.
Yeah.
So my next question is because of that kind of difficulty, is that what brought you on to strongman?
To be honest, I mean the dieting. Like, I've always loved my food, so I found every day of
Yeah,
bodybuilding hard. I
yeah,
was
yeah.
hungry, always tired, and when it came to the end of the season, around September, October 15, I felt like I'd exhausted every avenue. I didn't think it would get much better than being in America with Phil Heath like that. That I
Yeah,
thought this is as good as it gets. So when the season finished and I was able to sort of stop dieting and I carried on my training, and where I wasn't so fatigued and exhausted, I found like my strength had picked up, and lads I was training with were commenting on my strength, and um, that coincided with there was an insight into disabled strongman taking place in Kent, and the organizer had said, why don't you come down? Um, and I'd grown up watching strongman every Christmas and stuff. I loved it, and the thought of doing that really appealed to me. But to be fair, I was a bit skeptical. I spoke to the bloke on the phone, and when I was asking all the questions and stuff, and for someone that's missing a knee joint, it would have meant competing in a wheelchair. So
yeah,
I went down a little bit skeptical. Obviously, at Headley, it's drilled into you to be on a prosthetic leg, to be up and about, and so a wheelchair was bluffing it. It was a backward step. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I thought I'll go down, I'll try it, but I'm not sure I want to be in a wheelchair. Um, and then yeah, I went down, and there was some other lads that were there to try it again, all with different disabilities. Um, so they were sort of a really good bunch, and I got to talk to them. And again, just even away from the competitive side, to speak to people that had different injuries or disabilities from birth and stuff. I just I found like being in their company sort of fascinating. Um,
mm,
and I think that sort of brought the best in me out as well, in terms of sort of competing, because I was sort of in awe of what these people could do, and I wanted to do myself justice. So we tried the events. The reigning world's strongest disabled man was there to give us pointers and stuff, and we'd done like a sled pull and some log pressing, and then we went on to the thing that I was really looking forward to, and it was the Atlas Stones.
yeah, yeah,
And I'd never been to a strongman gym at that point. The gym I was at was very much a bodybuilding gym. It was an old spit and sawdust bodybuilding gym,
yeah, yeah,
but no real strongman equipment or anything. Um, and yeah, I'd never touched an Atlas Stone before. No idea about tacky or anything like that. Um, and then I sat in the wheelchair between two 3 foot oil barrels. Obviously, when it's done disabled, it's done slightly different. So rather than taking it from the floor up onto a like an oil barrel or something like that, or a podium, it's done
Yeah.
from side to side. So a lot of core strength, a lot like a Russian twist, but with an Atlas
Yeah.
stone in your hands. And then I think I started off on about the 50 kilo one, and I've got quite a long arm span, so that went easy. I just sort of put my hands under it, rolled it up onto my chest, and over it went. And they said, that looked good. You want to go up a weight and up a weight, and this kept going. And then the record at that time in strongman, in disabled strongman, had been a 90 kilo stone. That was as heavy as they'd gone in a competition, and I threw that across like with ease. And they
Yeah.
said, "Do you want to try it 100?" I was like, "I'll give it a go." And that went over, and I think I raised a few eyebrows.
Yeah.
And the organizer, he said, "Look, Britain's is in 6 weeks. Why don't you enter?" And I thought, these lads are going to be miles ahead of me. But I drove home completely over the whole wheelchair thing. It was like, I get it. I get why you need to be in it now. Having tried the events, I understand the need for the wheelchair. And yeah, I phoned my wife on the way home, and I was like, I've had a brilliant day. Like, the lads asked if I want to enter Britain's, and I was like, I'm going to do it. So I sort of signed up when I got home, and it was like, I've got no access to all of that kit and equipment. I don't know anyone in the gym that's done strongman, so I can't really pick. There was plenty of people in bodybuilding that I could pick the brains of when it came to diet, posing, all that stuff. So I could learn a lot from the people at the gym for the bodybuilding. But strongman, it was like, I'm going into it sort of blind. So I just ate as much as I could and trained as heavy as I could. And I went down just with an open mind. I thought I'll use it as a learning day. I'll watch everyone, watch how they do things, pick their brains, ask them what they eat, the rest they take, the recovery, when they do event training, if they know anywhere close to me where I can go and play with Atlas stones and so on. And I thought there was 23 strongmen that day, so I thought top 10, I'll be happy. And we were doing a bit of a warming up in the sort of gym that was there, and I'd seen one of the lads, and he's like, he looks a big solid lad. Like, I'm going to watch him and try and match what he does. If I can match him, I think I'll do quite well. And then I ended up winning it.
Yeah.
It had gone a hell of a lot better than I sort of possibly could have hoped for.
Yeah, it's interesting because one thing I read about you is just obviously after your accident, obviously you lost a lot of weight, as you said. Was it around about 60 kilos or so? And then by the time you started doing strongman again, doing strongman, you went up to about 120, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah.
Was that, am I right in saying?
Yeah.
It's
I doubled in weight from hospital.
yeah, that's good going. That's really good
Yeah.
going. But yeah, so that was 2016. You won that, but that doesn't stop there. You went on to win it the year after as well. So was that after? So after you won the first Britons, did you kind of look at yourself and think, "Wow, I can actually do this now. It's not just me just having a laugh or just being strong. You think I could actually do pretty well in this?"
I think I found it all quite surreal on the day. In my mind, I'd got lucky. I just had a really good day. But I still picked people's brains. I asked for tips on each event and stuff, and but the bug had got me then. So as soon as I got home, I had a couple of days sort of rest and letting it all sink in, and then I bought loads and loads of equipment, Austrian oak logs, Atlas stones, bars for deadlifting, giant dumbbells, every bit of kit and equipment you could think of. That so every possible event that might come up, I had the equipment for, and I sort of converted my garage so I put it all in there so I could set up any event, and yeah, picked the brains of people I was fortunate enough to sort of get to train with. Yeah, Lawrence Chalet was probably the biggest influence in that sense. I got to spend the day with him, and he sort of tinkered with the way that I was doing things, and then I could go away and train on the kit that I now had. So I could train specifically for strongman, as well as still going to the gym and doing everything conventional. I was then added in event training as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I ate like a strongman, I trained like a strongman, and I just lived that lifestyle. And then yeah, I was lucky. Obviously, 2017, because I was still the reigning Britain's strongest. The first Arnold's disabled strongman was in March 2017. So it was going to be an invitation only competition, and they were going to invite the best from Britain, America, and Canada. And so I was invited, and yeah, then I went and won that, and that's when you start to think, maybe I've found my niche, maybe I've found what I'm good at. And yeah, it didn't. I found like I wasn't missing the military so much. I'd had wobbles where I sort of every now and then like I'd miss it, and where it's like I'm at the Arnold Classic, you know, I'm in front of thousands of people, and I'm competing with like the best in the world at this, and I'm doing something that laying there at 60 odd kilos in hospital, people would have laughed at. You know, the thought of pulling trucks and stuff was, no one would have even considered it, you know, me included. And like here I was amongst the best in the world at something, you know, a sport I'd grown up watching, and just had to sort of pinch myself. And yeah, every time I went away, there would, rather than looking at the events that went well, I'd always look at the ones that didn't. So my training would then be, how can I improve the events that aren't going well? And then hopefully over time, I'll become more consistent. If I can place middle of the pack on my weaker events and win my strong events, I'll do all right. And then yeah, a few weeks later, I went and won Britain's again, and that's probably one of my best performances. I got 3 first places and 2 second places, so
Yeah.
I had that sort of consistency. And then yeah, the following year, I won the Arnold's again, and that was probably my best competition. That was then the point where it's like, I feel like I've got a genuine chance of being the best in the world. I won 4 out of the 5 events at the Arnold's. You know, I was quite a way ahead in terms of points on the day, and yeah, I was at my heaviest, my strongest, everything for competing felt great. And then I went and won England's, which the only England's that ended up happening. I won that a couple of weeks later. And just before that, I'd set a world record for pulling 2 racing trucks at the same time on Brands Hatch racetrack. And so then it sort of became like, what are my limits? You know, what can I achieve? I'd gone from being someone that was strong for a disabled person in the right way possible, to trying to be stronger than the average able-bodied person. And that was then my drive in the gym and stuff, is people looking across and you doing things that the average able-bodied person can't do. That was like, it was driving me. And I always sort of thought, if I surround myself with sort of positive people and people that are stronger than me, I'll keep making progress. And yeah, it sort of became a thing that truck pulling and stones were my events. They became my real sort of things that I became known for in the sport. They they were ones I was expected to do well in, and they were probably the two I was most proud of, because for me they were the most iconic events. The thought of seeing someone pull a truck and the thought of seeing someone lift Atlas stones, they were the things that epitomised strongman for me. So I was determined that they would be my strong points. And I think the thing that always really sort of motivated me, our head referee at all our disabled strongman competitions was Magnus Ver Magnusson. And I'd watched him on television. You know, he'd won 4 World's Strongest Mans, and to be on first name terms with him and sort of be able to call him a friend and to be competing in front of him, that always brought out that extra 10%. Like, I have to impress Magnus. Like, that's Magnus Ver Magnusson. Like, I have to leave a good impression. So that always played on my mind, is knowing he would be the referee. I wanted to win his approval, basically.
So obviously there's quite a lot of positives that came from doing your strongman stuff. Now, obviously, for people that know you now, who know you from doing the football, so how come, and what was the reason before that decision to change from doing your strongman to now obviously becoming a amputee footballer?
Yeah, I mean, I missed football. I think that was the one thing that never really left me, because I had no memory of strongman prior to losing a leg. I had nothing to compare it to, whereas I always grew up playing football, so I always missed it. But although at the Arnold's in 2018, that's when I genuinely felt I'm in with a really good chance of being the world's strongest. So I was at my heaviest, which was causing a lot of problems with my prosthetic. I was struggling to walk. I was at the limit of what the leg could take, and I'd already broken a foot just through sort of squatting and stuff, and so my prosthetists weren't particularly sort of happy, and it was becoming more and more painful to walk. And I was finding, although I was happy to compete in a wheelchair, I didn't like being in it day-to-day life. I liked being on my prosthetic, and I was finding it harder and harder and more painful to walk anywhere. Like, even, you know, my leg props up next to the bed at night, even to put it on from there and walk to the bedroom door, that was pain. And unlike some pains where it eases off as the day goes on, this got worse and worse. So I was irritable, I was angry, I was frustrated, and I'd had an operation in 2017, which, had it worked, would have been fantastic. I had the sciatic nerve cut, which should have, if it had worked, should have numbed the leg, and then the pains that I was having wouldn't be such a hindrance. But unfortunately for me, it didn't work, and it made it worse. It made my leg really painful, and I found in battalion I was always one of the blokes that enjoyed going out for a beer, and I was always quite sociable. I always had my door open. I was always around people, and I liked that, and I liked that obviously in football. And then I was finding I had no real social life. I'd become obsessed with trying to win the Worlds, and I'd come up short in 2017 by one event, and so that ate away at me for like a year, and it was like, right, I need to get heavier, and I can't go to the pub because I'll miss out on tomorrow's training, and I can't do this because I need to train, and it took over, and I found I was spending more and more time on my own. But the thing that, when you you have this cocktail of the weight causing the pain, the selfishness, I suppose, that comes with being on your own, the sciatic nerve that obviously was now causing more problems. But the thing that sort of really topped all of that off was one of the lads from the safety staff that I was working with, who clamped off my artery and saved my life. he took his own 2 weeks after I won my first competition. And I hadn't known him before working with him as safety, but he, like me and him, like became really sort of good friends afterwards. Obviously, I owed the man my life. Like, he
Yeah.
like he was sort of he could do no wrong in our family's eyes, and he'd always sort of pick up the phone, and he was in Wales, so there was a fair old distance between us, but he'd come to visit us and would always sort of tell us how proud he was of everything I was doing, and seemed in a good place. And then yeah, I'd gone on my phone one morning. I had a really rough night's sleep, and there was just something that wasn't right. And I'd gone on social media, and there was all of these things coming up about Spence, about being sort of gone too soon. And I said to my wife, I was like, I think something's happened. And I tried to get in touch with his family, and then it came up on the news that he was involved in something that he ended up obviously taking his own life. And that really sort of ate away at me, and rather than processing it at the time, I just sort of buried it and chose to keep my mind busy through Strongman, whereas that sort of concoction of everything all together, we'd gone to Florida. I was due to go out to Norway for the Worlds a couple of weeks later, and physically strongest I've ever been. Like, all the events I was doing above what they were going to be at the competition weight, like for repetitions. Like, I felt sort of phenomenal at that point, strength wise, but in terms of sort of being a family man and stuff, I couldn't walk. I was angry all the time because I was in so much pain. I was suffering with depression because I hadn't really sort of coped very well with Spence going, and it all came to a head on holiday. I think the humidity and stuff probably didn't help. And I'd had to spend the holiday in a wheelchair, which I hated, and so I just sort of hit rock bottom then. And so when we'd sat and spoken in the hotel room, it was sort of apparent that obviously being on my own so much wasn't good for me, and the weight was causing real problems with the pain I was in. So, and then I talked to my children, my two boys, about I had it in my head that if I didn't win the Worlds, they would see me as a failure. And talking to them, like, they actually couldn't care less. They weren't fussed what titles I had and stuff, and they just had a dad that was unhappy, and that made it easier for me to make the decision to come away from it. So I spoke to an old warrant officer from the Grenadiers, and they were really good with sorting out counselling for me. So as soon as we got back to England, that could start. I sat down with my wife, and we put together a list of all the things that were causing me problems, all the negatives, all of the things I missed, going to the pub, having a social life, playing football, and all of the things I still wanted to achieve. And the thing that kept coming up was I really miss football. So it's like, I'm going to use this opportunity now that I haven't got the pressure of trying to win the Worlds. I can lose some of this strongman weight, and obviously get the counselling so I can sort that out. And in the meantime, we can sort of look at other avenues for sorting out the pain that's in my leg. And I was very fortunate I got to go on the Dr. Christian program, and I had a series of Botox injections which numbed the leg completely. So that enabled me to lose more weight because I wasn't in pain on a treadmill and stuff. And once I'd got down to a weight I was a bit more comfortable with, and I could wear the leg the majority of the day, and walk enough to do the school run and things like that. I then got involved with amputee football because, to be fair, the weight that I was at Strongman, there was no way a set of crutches was going to take my weight.
Yeah.
So I had to obviously lose enough for a pair of crutches to take my weight, and yeah, and then I got involved with amputee football.
Yeah. So so obviously you say you're roughly about 120 kg when you were doing your strongman. What kind of weight did you get down to start doing your football training?
Probably not as low as I thought. Probably not as low as once I'd started playing, I realised I needed to be at.
Yeah.
I think it was about 115 when I first
Oh,
played.
right.
So
Okay.
when I first started, I joined Peterborough United, and yeah, my first game for them down at Arsenal, it was apparent in the team photo. I was the width of two of the young lads.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't very mobile on the pitch. I just played at centre half, and um, it was such an eye opener as to how quick some of these lads were on crutches, and again,
Yeah.
similar to strongman, using it as a learning curve to watch people, and um, that then kicked me on further to come away realizing the level that amputee football's played at in this country. As like, wow, I need to lose more. Like, right, I need to
Yeah.
get a decent set of crutches. I need to do all of the things that they suggested, and I need to come back lighter. And so the league matches were every month. So every time we met back up again for a set of fixtures, I was lighter and lighter, and
Yeah.
so it got easier on the pitch. I don't think I was ever going to beat anyone for pace. The majority of lads in the league were born after I joined the army, so there's quite an age
Yeah.
gap.
Yeah.
So I'm like the sort of one of the granddads in the league. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was never going to be someone quick. You know, there's lads in the league that are 9-10 stone. And even
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
I'm sort of 15 and a half. Like, I
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah.
got it in me to get. I'd have to lose the other
Yeah.
leg to get that right, I think.
Yeah. So, with your equipment, you're saying like you had to go and get your equipment. So, did you ever get help with acquiring, like, because I can only assume that with your crutches and stuff, are they like sort of bog standard what you'd get in hospital, or do you have to get like specifically made ones for obviously for football?
Some lads, to be fair, some of the lads who haven't necessarily got the support of forces, charities, and pensions and stuff. Some of the lads
Yeah.
who've lost their legs to cancer or sort of as children and stuff. They haven't got that luxury, so they use NHS crutches. But I was very fortunate that the regiment set up a Colonel's Fund, which
Okay.
is a fund to support all of the wounded grenadiers. And likewise with the sort of counselling where they funded that for me. They also helped with ordering me a set of carbon fibre crutches from Canada of all places.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm very fortunate. I get to play on a £600 pair of carbon fibre crutches that weigh 700 grams.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was very lucky that, you know, obviously the carbon fibre is strong enough to support. You know, I'm still not light compared to some of those lads. So
Mm.
you do see a lot of crutches, and I've had it in the past when I've used cheaper ones, snap. So
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas to have a set of carbon fibre ones, I'm very lucky. I don't have to worry about my crutches snapping, and they can take my weight a bit more. But yeah, I've had a lot of sort of support. I haven't been found wanting for anything in terms of the grenadiers, and um, one of the warrant officers is his role is the regimental casualty officer. So he's the link man between myself, the regiment, and the charities. So anything that I sort of pick up the phone and say I could do with help with this, I'll sort of leave it with him, and he'll come back to me with an answer. And I've been very lucky, I think, because I've been proactive from the day that I lost my leg, and tried to sort of represent the regiment the best I could. That's paid off when it comes to obviously needing help in return.
Yeah, yeah. It's good that you got a lot of help. Like the reason why I mention it is because I'm not that I'm bitter or anything, but when I left, obviously I didn't go through the the same scenario as yourself, but I left on my own accord because I just felt like it wasn't for me. Again, without going into my own story, I was a 22-year career man. I thought that's what I wanted to do ever since I was a kid. Came back from Afghan, I had PTSD, and I lost my best friend who I've mentioned on the podcast before. And I just thought, do you know what? It's not the same as what it is anymore. And I just had enough, and I just thought, do you know what? I'm done. So I left. Yeah. I left the army in 2012 with PTSD and depression. And I was the opposite. Like, don't get me wrong, I did get a bit of help, but once I'd left the military, I had to do every single thing myself. I got no help whatsoever. And I'm from people that I've spoke to, I'm glad, that you got your help yourself. And I know that other people I've spoke to have had help. So I'm seeing that there's been a big sort of increase in people getting help from military charities and like your battalion, regiments, etc. So it is good to see that, people are still helping, even after maybe years that you've left. So I suppose that's a really good thing. And obviously, me personally, again, this is just my opinion, but I think we're coming now to a different generation of military personnel. Again, it's just my opinion, but obviously, with people now joining the military, you're not going to have the same sort of things that probably where we joined. We had things like Bosnia, Kosovo, or even obviously Afghan and Iraq, because they're, unless you're in a specialist unit, most people don't go to them places anymore, no. and probably won't see the certain things that we may have seen and done. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be different seeing the types of, not want to say types, that sounds like I'm being condescending or whatever, but I mean like the types of sort of veterans we're having that are joining nowadays, or leaving in this time, because like I said, there's things that are different from when we joined, and obviously the people that joined before us in sort of the the 80s and stuff. So it's just, again, it's just my personal opinion that I feel like, again, it's just a different generation of personnel that are leaving nowadays. And like I said, I think it's good that you're obviously getting the help that you need. And obviously, I'm assuming if you ever needed help in the future, I'm sure you could just speak to people and they'll help you, even though you've left the military, years previous, which is good.
Yeah. Me personally, obviously, at Headley Court, I got to know lads from all different regiments, and a lot of us have stayed in touch. And the Grenadiers are one of only a handful of regiments that have a casualty officer in place. I think the Rifles and the Royal Marines are the others, and the Guards. And from my own experience, it's something that's massively beneficial. Spence, he was Royal Welsh, and he was discharged with post-traumatic stress. So that's a red flag, in my opinion, straight away, is you're discharging a man there that needs help. And when I went to his funeral, I think a lot of the feeling was that they'd just washed their hands of him. And one of his old platoon commanders had said to me, what's your regiment doing differently that, your lads are feeling like they've got someone to turn to? And I'd said about the role of a casualty officer, and in our regiment, it's a retired warrant officer. It's the old drum major. So there's a rapport with them, and you feel like you can pick up the phone to him. And I think a lot of lives would be saved from lads that are taking their own from different regiments, for people like yourself who had left with sort of depression and post-traumatic stresses, had you still had that link to the Royal Signals, just to pick up the phone, just almost that transition period, and to know that you're not like just a number that's forgotten. We still have Black Sunday and Grenadier Day every year. So Black Sunday's our Regimental Remembrance Day, and Grenadier Day is the day for the families to go into the barracks. There's barbecues and alcohol and all that stuff, like things for the children, and they get all of the kit and equipment out for the children to sort of get hands on. And so, and that's open to grenadiers that left 40, 50 years ago right up to now. So you still feel part of the regiment. And yeah, having spoke to obviously, people like yourself, just still feeling like you're not forgotten makes a massive difference. And just having that phone number that, if you're in Florida, I'd got to that point where I said to my wife, I've spent the last few months contemplating suicide on a daily basis. To have that person there at the time on the phone, it was like, I can phone him and we can get the ball rolling. Whereas for people like Spence, obviously he didn't have anyone from his regiment to turn to. The charities that do cater for it, combat stress and stuff, were so backlogged with a waiting list of people trying to get on the courses for help that people like him didn't feel like they had anyone to turn to. And I think the cost of employing, doesn't necessarily have to be an old warrant officer, but someone that served, that has a good rapport with the blokes and stuff, would go a long way. What they would lose in paying him for a year, they would gain in saving blokes' lives, I think. It amazes me that every regiment hasn't got someone like that.
Yeah, it is, and I completely agree. It would be nice because I've done work for people at combat stress, and there's only so much they can do. I understand that they're extremely busy, and I'm sure you probably are aware of this, that the amount of veterans who have unfortunately took their own lives after leaving the forces is far too high. Like, there's every week, I'm not sure if you might be the same as me, but I'm on a handful of groups on social media with military groups, and it only seems like maybe at least once a week or every other week there's someone unfortunately taken their life. And I feel, again, there is people, and I've spoke to people who say, like, well, it's your choice, you joined the military, and if you wanted to, you knew that you were going to be going into these situations where you potentially could be seeing things you don't want to be seeing, etc., and losing people, losing friends, and I can see that point of view, but at the same time, all we're doing is a job. We're doing something that we've wanted to do, if not from a kid or something, to help us coming from bad backgrounds. And I feel like the help that is out there at the moment, like I said, is getting better, but it's not 100%, I don't think. And I feel at the moment, obviously with COVID and stuff, it seems to have got a bit worse, because just generally as well. Again, I'm not saying not just with veterans, but obviously the suicide rate in this country especially has gone quite high compared to what it was pre-COVID. Obviously, because we're not able to do things, we're not allowed to go out and do things that we'd like to do. And like for me, I can't go up to the lakes and go walking or wherever it may be, because I have to sit at home. And people have lost jobs. So yeah, I can see, like, what you were saying about having like a kind of like a welfare officer, but on the other side. And one thing I would say is, and I feel it's like with yourself, obviously coming from a particular smaller battalion, obviously, or going from the Guards regiments, and someone like myself who comes from a signals unit, which is considered to be, I think, the second biggest unit in the British force, you know, in the British Army. There's obviously going to have to be a little bit of differences because there's more people, but again, there should be at least someone there per unit. Like, I know that each unit has their own. You know, we have the RSA, which is the Royal Signals Association, and I'm sure there's people you can speak to, but it's something. Don't get me wrong, I'm okay now, you know, and only because of what I do as a job, you know, as in now working with pre-COVID, working with children and stuff like that, and it's something that, and as yourself, you've obviously gone through lots of little different things, and then come to a conclusion of what you wanted to do. Obviously, coming from your accident to now, and it's the same for me. As I say, going from what I thought was a 22-year career, getting 8 years in, and thinking, well, it's not for me anymore. And then obviously I decided to, you know, work with children and do outdoor education, which I absolutely love. So there's something, again, it's slightly going off topic, but it's something that, you know, it just kind of reminded me of, which I thought I'd just say. Now, I just wanted to last few things we want to talk about. I don't want to keep you all day. So obviously you've not long released your book. Now, obviously, for people who haven't or who don't know much about you, especially before this, before the podcast, can you just give a bit of an overview, really, about what's in the book and what it's all about?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't something I ever thought I would do. One, because I didn't think people would be interested, and two, I didn't really have the time. Like I've made a point ever since I've been out of the military of always being busy, whether that's taking children, the children to their sort of after school clubs, or me being at football training or the gym, or like I've always been busy. And then about a week before we went into that first lockdown, I was out for a drink with a couple of people I'd served with, and one of the lads had said, you know, with all the things you've done, you should write a book. And I sort of laughed it off, and he was like, no, he said, while you're sort of current, you know, while it's sort of all relatively recent, I think people would be interested. And I didn't really sort of think of it. And then we went into lockdown, and the gyms closed, football training finished, our season was null and void, and I was like, I've got nothing now. All the things I enjoy, all the children's clubs had stopped, obviously the schools closed. I was like, now is the perfect opportunity. I have got the time, and I could do it. So yeah, I shut myself away in our sort of office at home on the laptop, sort of wrote in chronological order everything from being that teenage boy and the reasons why I wanted to get away from home and sort of start a life in the military and a fresh start, and what it was like to be on tour. I tried to talk more about the things that people maybe wouldn't see on the news and stuff when it comes to being in the guards. You know, bulling your boots and buffing your buff belt and everything like that. All the little details, and I spoke of it more fondly about. I used to enjoy a night out quite often in battalion. So I've got a lot of funny memories, and I wanted to put that side of it in. I wanted people to understand me as a person. I wanted to write it in my own words, so that if someone read it that knew me, they would be able to picture me sort of talking to them and saying it. And so I wanted to do it myself. So I sat here 3 to 4 hours every single day, going through every sort of chapter of my life, from sort of a teenager right the way through to now, to almost give people an idea, you know, look into sort of my head and what pushes me, what motivates me, and why have I done the things I've done. Like I've always been sort of very stubborn and driven, and hopefully by the time people have sort of got to the end of the book, they'll understand why. So yeah, lockdown seemed like the perfect opportunity, and it took me pretty much the whole 4 months of sitting in here writing every single day. And Yeah, I must admit I was glad when it was finished.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever sit and write another one.
Yeah.
But it was actually a time to sort of reflect, I suppose, on everything I have done, because when it was strongman and bodybuilding, it was always the next competition, never really taking time to sort of appreciate what you've done, but just the next one, and sitting there and writing it all down and seeing, you know, a thick book sat there and think, well, actually, I have done quite a lot. And
Mm.
it's probably the first time where I sat and felt quite proud. Um, and there's something there, you know, in type, that when my children are older, that they can pick up and read if they want to, and hopefully, you know, it's something that they'll be proud of.
Well, I'm sure they will, mate. I'm pretty certain they will. Um, as I say, what you've done is incredible. Like I say, you've gone from something that's obviously going from your accident, which was completely, like distraught, and it's completely changed the outlook of your life, I suppose, to what you're doing now, which is amazing. And obviously, I wouldn't be speaking to you now, um, if you'd just done a normal sort of day to day military lifestyle, I probably never have, without sounding bad, would have heard of you.
Yeah,
You've just
yeah,
been a normal squaddy like me. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I like I say, I appreciate you, taking the time. There's last couple of things I want to ask you, buddy. What's next for you? Obviously, hoping now that we can come out of lockdown in the next few months, and things will start going to sort of relative normality. What's kind of next for you?
So obviously, the priority at the minute is football. So this season I've joined West Bromwich Albion.
Okay.
Our season should have started in January, but obviously we haven't done any training for months, and so training, fingers crossed, is back in 2 weeks' time, and then with the season possibly starting in May. So my sort of drive at the minute is being as fit and conditioned as I can be for football.
Mm.
Just trying to sort of improve as much as I can, and try and be more of an asset to the team, I suppose, um, and play for as long as I can, because I love it, and I wish I'd got into it sooner, to be honest. Like I said, like that age gap, I wish I was a little bit younger and could play it for longer. But this year is actually 10 years since I was shot in Canada, so I wanted to do a whole year of like challenges and stuff, and sort of mark it. So I've entered the 10 kilometer stage of the Milton Keynes Marathon in May. So I'm going to do
Okay.
all 10K on crutches. And then in July, uh, when it will have been sort of 10 years, I'm going to climb Snowdon on crutches. And yeah, to be honest, like I think my sort of goals in terms of, trying to break world records and stuff like that, that's probably, that chapter's probably closed as well now. Now it's just, if I can play till I'm 40, like I'll be really happy with that. And then maybe more long term, I did my coaching badges while I was still at Headley Court, with the Army FA, and they were always there as a back burner, that, you know, maybe one day I can go back to football. I didn't think I'd get to play again, so I thought, at least I could sort of be involved in some capacity, and maybe when the time comes when I can't play anymore, then I'd like to go into coaching. But yeah, sort of the short term, I just want to get back on the pitch. We haven't had a competitive game now for 12 months. So I just want to play in a meaningful game.
Yeah. I can completely agree, mate. Like I play rugby,
Yeah,
and it's obviously the exact same situation. We've not been able to play. I've not played for probably, bloody hell, it must be nearly 2 years now. Because I
right.
was in Australia 10 days before lockdown. So but, for the original lockdown, so I ended up obviously coming back home, and I played their season, which is the opposite. It's basically the football season, I think, which is
Yeah.
opposite of what we play. So yeah, I've not played for a long time, and I know that my mates who play rugby and stuff like that are so wanting to go back. And for us, it's going to be September now because that's the sort of start of the normal season, or August maybe. But yeah, it must be difficult. Obviously, everyone's going through pretty crap time at the moment. My last thing I want to ask you, buddy, is for anyone who's listening, like what advice would you give people? I know, like you say, there's going to be a lot of people who are feeling down, crap. They can't do anything. They've got they're at home and sat on their ass and not doing anything. What advice would you give people? Just like a quick paragraph or so.
I think for me, in obviously this lockdown, I had the luxury in the first one of writing the book, so that consumed a lot of my time. Whereas for this one, I was a bit more worried because it's like I haven't got that this time.
Mm.
So I've very much tried to achieve a positive every day, um, regardless of how small it is. And obviously, for everybody, that might be a different thing. That might be making your bed in the morning. That might be going for a walk, going out on a bike, like anything, anything that's achievable, so that you finish every single day having done something positive. Whether that's exercise or whatever, or sitting and writing a book or something. Just putting things into words, like something to have made each day count, so that you're not just sort of wasting away and sort of losing these days, because you're not going to get them back. So the main thing I would pass on to people is, sort of make the most of every day, and try and set yourself a positive, like I said, regard, doesn't matter how small it is, like even if it's, I'm going to make sure I drink 3 liters of water today. If you get to the end of the day and you've done it, like you've done something positive. And I think that rolls into the next day and the next day, and then before you know it, you've had a positive week, a positive month, and then hopefully we're out the other side of this. Whereas I think equally, when you're at a low point, one bad day can spiral into two, to a week, to a month, and that's when obviously things get harder and harder. So yeah, I just one of the sort of interesting things that sort of stuck in my mind, is the sort of bucket of water theory, and there's sort of 4 taps, and you've got all of these sort of different stresses going in, and gradually the levels rising and levels rising, and if you don't sort of release those taps, like it overflows and gets a bit too much for people. And if you can name those sort of 4 taps as 4 things you enjoy doing, and you can turn them on slightly, that level is never going to get too much. And that's something that's been quite poignant and stuck with me. So I've tried to pick those, name those 4 taps as 4 positive things that I like doing. So for me, like I said, I can go in my garage gym every single day, go out for a walk with the children to the park. So, there's a positive. I get to do things like this with people like yourself. So there's a positive, and I've sort of made every day count. And I think that's something anybody can implement into their lives, because that bucket of water with those 4 taps can be whatever 4 things they choose, just things that they enjoy, that they miss, or that are feasible to be able to tick off at the minute.
And one thing I just wanted to add onto that is, for me, what I would always say to people as well, and again, going, because we both come from similar background, and we both have had our own mental health problems, or not problems, just issues. Now, I think personally, the biggest thing is to speak and talk about it. Like, I can say that from my own personal point of view. I was the opposite. I didn't talk about my problems for a long time, until one day where I just exploded. And for people that know me, and just so you got a bit of an insight, like I was an alcoholic for a good number of years after I left the military, and now for nearly 5 years now that I haven't touched a drop, not a drop of alcohol I've touched in 5 years, and that was my my thing with that is, and it's not my saying, it's not my quote, is I know a lot of people turn to drugs or drink, and people that I know from the military have gone down that route. End of the day, if you say, for instance, I was going down the drink route and I was drinking every day, you still wake up in the morning with an absolutely smashing headache, still with the same problems. Your problems haven't gone away. You've still got the same problems. You've just got a banging headache. It makes things worse. So that's my, if I can add something to that, it's just to talk. Doesn't matter how, especially, and again, I'm going to say it from our point of view as men. Like, I know a lot of men don't like talking about it because they think it's like demoralizing them or something like that. It doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter if we're big, like us, big army lads or whatever, or you're just a normal civilian or whatever, male and female, or even, and again, children. We all have our own problems. We all have our own issues. And I think the best thing to do is if you can talk about it when you feel like you've got a problem straight away, that's the first point, is to talk. Because like you say, it gets on top of you and top of you and top of you, and before you know it, the whole world's on top of you. And that's unfortunately when we get to the point where people are taking their lives and stuff like that, which is very unfortunate. So that's the last thing I wanted to say. Now, last thing is, if people want to sort of follow what you're doing and your journey and stuff like that, where can people find you, like on social media, etc.?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook. If they just type in Mark Smith amputee footballer, that'll come up.
Awesome. Like I said, I'll put everything in the description, so everyone knows where to find you and stuff like that. So like I said, the last thing is I really appreciate you coming on, buddy. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. It's gone very quick. It's been nice chatting to you. So I really appreciate it. And like I said, hopefully if people can take things, even if it's a small thing from this conversation, and kind of put it towards their life and make themselves a bit more positive, etc., then I'd think that'd be quite a good thing. As I say, help one person, they help another, they help another. I've said this before. I'm not expecting to help. I'm not expecting to get like 1 million views and 1 million people, etc., etc. One person helps one person, helps another one person, and eventually you're helping a lot of people, which is good. So thanks very much, mate. I appreciate you coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. For people that, again, want to keep an eye on what I'm doing, I've got more podcasts coming out. Every Friday they come out 6 p.m. And if I don't see you soon, I'll catch you on the flip side.